using a simulator.
Walmart has filed a motion to dismiss a lawsuit by the Federal Trade Commission that accused the retailer of allowing its money transfer services to be used by scam artists, calling it an egregious instance of agency overreach. Earlier this year, the FTC alleged that Walmart failed to properly secure the money transfer services offered at its stores, stealing what the FTC calls hundreds of millions of dollars from customers. Walmart said today that the agency lacks constitutionally valid authority to sue for money or injunctive relief. Walmart also argued that the agency is trying to contort a regulation that was aimed to go after telemarketers and those who actively help them, but that Walmart is neither. In final news this hour, Incredible Hulk actor Lou Ferrigno is now an honorary police officer in Syracuse, New York. Ferrigno talked about the honor on Fox and Friends.
In California, I've been a deputy sheriff for 17 years. I went through the academy. I'm a certified police deputy sheriff. People don't realize what these officers go through, protecting life and property, risking their lives. And these guys are the real heroes to me.
Ferrigno has been in the Syracuse area filming an unrelated movie. Find more news on afn.net.
Forget about Facebook.
The last 10 days we've been banned twice, and is unbanning a word?
They put us under the ban. Christians and conservatives
Don't need your YouTube.
Banned one day, banned again.
AFR programs are now live streaming on the AFA streaming app. Now you can get shows like Today's Issues straight from the source.
Put back on the next.
just say unbanned.
Unbanned.
Just search AFA streaming or visit streaming.afa.net to sign up.
You know, as Christians, we have to understand and be real with where we are.
That's what we have to see first, individually.
And where our mindset is and what we desire.
Airing the Addisons.
I think what God is really calling us back to, it's those individual personal revivals in our own lives where we're like, oh Lord, what have we done? We have minimized you.
Promoting truth, wisdom, and empowerment.
As the church, man, we should be on the forefront of making disciples, of indoctrination and godly things.
If we don't train our kids, they will not be able to stand.
Airing the Addisons.
On American Family Radio, thank you so much for listening. I'm Miki.
And I'm Will.
And Victory and J-Mac are on tap to help us navigate the show. It's great to be back with you after a week of being off. We took a vacation week to just stay home.
Yeah.
Like to just be home. Our kids started back to their official school year. And I say official because that's where a lot more structure goes into education, but they are being educated all year round. I mean, they're constantly learning, but we wanted to make sure that they got off to the right start and that we had a system and a schedule in place. And so rather than hitting the road and traveling somewhere, which is kind of what we do a lot.
Right.
It was more of a vacation to just be home. It was actually a really, really, really good time. And I think they're all good to go. I think they're set and I think they're doing well. So, but it's great to be back because there's a familial feel to what we do in radio. And I don't mean to sound a little bit sappy, but there is sort of this is family. And so when we're away, there is a feeling of like, but the relaxation is good.
Yeah. I agree. I think you have to have those times. I think it was pretty much your idea. You was like, man, we need to take this week off to be able to reset and get things ready for our schooling and everything. And looking back on it, it was great.
Thanks.
Yeah, great idea. You know, I'm usually a type of person, I'm like, man, my routine is going to be messed up. So it's hard to get back in the swing. But, man, I think that was good because we did accomplish what we set out to do. So.
Very good. This is a really cool year. This is a little bit different. You've worked with the younger two. We have three younger. We have the big three and the little three.
Yes.
Historically, you've worked with the younger two, primarily focusing on catechizing them and training them in doctrine and Bible study, scripture memorization. And but this year we're doing something different. That you are doing that. As you've always done, but you are also adding, I guess, what you would consider their academic curriculum to that.
Yes.
And that has been really neat because, to see you crouched over a little table, it's kind of fun. It's a
It
little
is a
more
little
structured. They're first grade, so it's a little more structured, just a little bit.
Yeah.
Still a lot of fun. But I got to tell you and say this. I thought this was really interesting. That Sam Witt, who is now 6, for the first time, was trying to teach Timmy, and said that he wanted to be a teacher when he grows up. And I think that is directly connected to you teaching him the academic side of things as well. I think maybe he thought that just women are teachers because, I'm teaching here. But I think seeing you do that has opened up his world. And he was actually conducting a little class, a little homeschool class. He's one student, like trying to teach a cat. He was trying to, the cat just kept leaving the room and he's like, Timmy, come back, Timmy, come back. But that's what you get from an almost 2-year-old. So anyway, we're going to talk a little bit about education today, which I think is a really interesting take on the student loan forgiveness. We're going to have our brother on, Todd Shannon. I'm going to just keep calling him Sir Todd. So Todd Shannon is going to be on with us, and we're going to get his take on the student loan forgiveness. That is a conversation that I think Christians should be having. We should be asking some basic questions about how we process that, not only a political question about it, not only a financial question about it, but there's also a moral question about it. Yeah. And I think we should be having that conversation. I also think whenever the government is giving anything, we should be looking more deeply into the reasons why. Yeah, and I think that Sir Todd Shannon has an interesting take, one that is very provocative and worth exploration. He has a really interesting take on why he thinks this is happening. Why don't you have the debt forgiveness of other loans that people have, and why specifically student loans, for colleges and things like that? Why is that happening? Yeah. I think his take on this is very interesting. It is worth unpacking. And in fact, I would say when you couple his take with the other evidence that's available to us, we talk about what's happening in education and the indoctrination. I don't think he's off the mark at all. Yeah. At all. And so we'll get into talking a little bit about that. I don't know did you want to comment on that before I go into this other story that I have?
I agree. I believe that Todd has a great perspective on different things like this, and other things as well. And so it's going to be really interesting to talk to him about the moral side of this and what's going on and what, maybe we haven't thought about. Something that I heard someone say, I forgot who it was, but they were like, well, why, instead of doing it like this, why don't they give the money back to those who have paid off their loans? I'm like, man,
Look, I had student loans. I paid off my student loans. Thank you very much. I don't need the government to give me anything for that. That's what I should have done, because I borrowed the money and I borrowed the money, and you and I talked about this once we got married, and anyway, fortunately you didn't have any student loan debt. So you kind of, that was my dowry. That's what I brought to you. Just a little bit of student loan debt.
I had a little bit.
Did you really? Mm-hmm. Did you pay it off before we were married?
A lot of it was paid off by some things my dad, in his wisdom, did.
Okay, yeah. Because they must not have been significant. I seem to have forgotten.
It was not. My dad, man, he was thinking way ahead of time. Praise God for his
I feel like my student loan debt was like a barnacle. Just something wouldn't go. I felt like it wouldn't go away. Like every time you got the statement, it's like, man, did y'all get my last payment? Did you get that? Have you credited that to my account? But anyway, praise the Lord, it is gone. I don't think I should be paid back for that.
And some people
I
are
borrowed
like, man, we giving all the, people
but I borrowed it.
Who have paid it off, why don't we get
Good grief. Can I tell you something? Full disclosure, guys, I kicked myself because I just did not have the right respect for money. I did not have a biblical understanding of money. And there were things that I did in college that so the very first thing that I learned, and I'll go into this other article here, but the very first thing that I learned and that I did correct was not to get a credit card. They would set up these tables.
Oh, yeah. Man,
and they'd have you come over to get a free Frisbee. And just Get a T-shirt.
The T-shirts for me.
Get a koozie. Get a little stress ball and come over and just sign up for a credit card, which I don't know if they still do that on college campuses, but I think it should be illegal to do because you've got people who, excuse the expression, but are fresh out of the womb on a college campus. They don't know what it means to have a credit card. They don't know what the interest rates are, and they don't know what those interest rates do to the money that they borrow. So they go out to Chili's, you know what I mean? Speaking from experience, and then
Man,
you go out to Chili's and you're like, man, Southwest egg rolls for everybody. Come on, bring out the egg rolls. Like everybody get egg rolls, and then they bring you the check and you're just like, no problem. And then you pass them the credit card and then you end up, paying back for the egg rolls for 7 years.
It's crazy.
And then at the 7th year, you're just sort of like, now can I marry the person that no, I'm just kidding. But it's just absolutely insane. But I did learn, during through our ministry, they started training us on the use of money and financial responsibility. It became one of our what we eventually called jumpstart classes. It wasn't initially offered, but it was one of those things that we began to offer to freshmen. Man. You remember that?
Oh,
and so we had these jumpstart classes, and so learned about the credit card debt. But at the same time, I think it should have, even while you're on campus, it should have been expanded to include unnecessary student loans. Because the thing that bothers me about the student loan debt that I had was that it was not necessary. Now, when I say it was not necessary, what I mean is that I had grants, right? So I could have, I could have been okay not taking out student loans, but I wanted, quote unquote, I wanted to be a little more comfortable and I'll pay it back.
Right.
I'll pay it back a little bit here, a little bit there.
But later.
Oh, man. I just, anyway, there are some things that I think we could do to avoid this problem.
Yes.
And I think one of the big ones, and we'll talk a little bit about this, is also the necessity of college and the necessity of going off to university and how, and Todd has some thoughts about where he thinks this ultimately is going to go when you start forgiving student debt and then kind of like the progression. And I think I'll let him unpack that for our listeners because I think it's really interesting. And again, I don't think it's black helicopter at all. I mean, it could be if you didn't see them already making these kinds of moves, but it's just very important. And so we're going to have that conversation. I know that we have very many listeners who probably will benefit from having some of their student loan debt canceled, but that doesn't stop us having this conversation. Right. I know that there will be some people who will have a conflict like, well, why is that not a good thing? Why shouldn't I be celebrating that? Or is it a good thing? Or should I be celebrating? Hasn't, the wealth of the wicked been laid up for the just? So now we'll talk about all of that. Is it good? Is it good for us to borrow and to not pay back and to feel like, we've inherited some sort of windfall? I think all of this points to a consistent just decline, a move away from truth, right? It's sort of like we have a sliding scale of what is morally right. And this, it even comes down to money. It really, really does. So anyway, we'll get into talking about that. But I read this article that I'm not even sure I'm going to be able to unpack all of it in this first segment. So may just make mention of it, because one of the things that we're going to look at when we talk to Sir Todd is the moves that are happening in our public schools, the moves to indoctrinate children, and even the way our children are educated. We talk about this from time to time, but I think sometimes people may perceive us as coming down harder on some of these issues than we need to. For example, woke education. I can remember us doing some shows a few months back, maybe even a year ago now, where we talked about the use of critical race theory in schools and how teachers are now being tasked with perceiving certain kids as just not being able to learn, just not being able to do basic math, that math becomes oppressive, that to tell a kid that there is an objective answer that we should arrive at, that formulas are not, the colonization of their minds, right? That these things, sometimes I think people don't realize the effects of these things on children happening in real time. And I was reading this article that was posted. This was a Time magazine article, and I read it at some point during the week last week, and I saved it thinking, I really want to have somewhat of a conversation around this. It's inside the massive effort to change the way kids are taught to read. And of course, it grabbed my attention because it deals with education, and that's something that I pay a lot of attention to. But I was surprised to see where it ultimately went. And in the interest of time, I'm going to give a little bit of background here and then maybe read a couple paragraphs. I may not even get into it. We'll see. I will bring it back around. But the interesting thing is an observation and even sort of a modern day fight that is coming out of Oakland, California, whereby you've got some individual teachers who are rising up and saying, listen, our kids can't read. They are saying the woke approach to reading has not served them well, and Black kids are most adversely affected. Time magazine, the woke approach to reading has not served them well, whereby you say, well, the reason we have problems with these kids reading is because they've got white teachers or because their needs are not being met. But the biggest problem has been the change in the way kids have been taught to read, sounding out letters, understanding the combinations of letters. Okay, so not only phonics, but phonemic teaching and all of these things. They're saying originally in Oakland, they said that those things were oppressive to teach some kids, that letters make certain sounds.
Wow.
And now what they are finding is that, hey, our kids can't read. All right, Aaron the Addisons, American Family Radio. We'll take a break and we'll be right back.
Titus 2 verses 11 through 15 tells us how to live during these last days. This is Jim Garlow. It says, "For the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation for all people, training us to renounce ungodliness and worldly passions, and to live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in the present age, waiting for our blessed hope, the appearing of the glory of our great God and Savior Jesus Christ, who gave himself for us to redeem us from all lawlessness and to purify for himself a people for his own possession who are zealous for good works. Declare these things, exhort and rebuke with all authority. Let no one disregard you." As Christians, living in this sinful world can be tough, but we are commanded to turn from godless living and sinful pleasures and seek wisdom and righteousness from God. And remember the glory when he returns. There's more at wellversedworld.org.
The thing that solidified the reality that you were my wife was your heart for God. When the scripture says, "He that finds a wife." So I began conferring with my pastor in New Orleans the whole time. I would tell him about you, tell him when we spend time together. And he said, "Abe, spend some time praying and ask God to reveal her heart to you and write down what the Lord shows you," and which is what I did.
It was all God. It was really God, because when you did that, you followed the instruction of your pastor, and God revealed to you who I was. God showed you things that you couldn't have known at that moment in our short time meeting each other. I was so grateful because it showed me that you hear from God. And I was at that moment convinced that the only place to live is in the middle of God's will. Like, I knew that was a part of the foundation that God would have us to build for our marriage, going forward.
Tune in to By Design, Saturday afternoons at 4 Central on American Family Radio.
This is Life Issues with Brad Mattis, president of Life Issues Institute.
Here's encouraging news for mothers and fathers who've experienced miscarriage. A new test, appropriately called STORK, was developed by a research team from Columbia University and backed by the National Institutes of Health. It assesses the risk of miscarriage for an existing pregnancy. It's relatively inexpensive and provides same-day results. Current tests can cost thousands of dollars and take weeks to get the results. If done in the doctor's office, STORK would eliminate the need to send it to a lab for diagnosis. diagnosing. It has an accuracy rate of 98% or higher. One red flag is Stork can detect extra or missing chromosomes, which could be conceivably used for identifying and aborting babies diagnosed with Down syndrome. I pray Stork will instead be used to save countless babies.
Like us on Facebook at Life Issues and stay informed, more informed than you've ever been.
This is Airing the Addisons on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to Airing the Addisons on American Family Radio. We appreciate you listening. I'm Miki.
And I'm Will.
And we are joined by Sir Todd Shannon, who is the host of the podcast, Who Cares What Todd Thinks? We do, obviously, and also writes. He blogs. The blog is called Todd Thinks. You can find it at toddthinks.substack.com. We'll say that again as we near the end of the show. We invited Todd on because he just hates people. And he doesn't want people to get blessed. He doesn't want people to store up money. He doesn't want people to prosper even as their soul prospers. And so we just wanted to hear from him. Todd, why on earth would you have a problem with people having their debts canceled? It's a year of Jubilee for people. Like, what is your problem?
Oh, man, that's hilarious. First of all, I just want to say I'm super excited because I'm always on with Will. I never get Will and Miki. I never get the full Addison experience. You know what I'm saying? So
it really is a Jubilee year.
It's Jubilee year. Yes, but to your point, yes, I hate people having money. That's just that's not the big out. But no,
I'm just kidding.
So yeah. So I talked the other day about this debt canceling thing, and the funny thing is that if this was a true debt canceling, yes, this would be a Jubilee situation. I'd be like, praise God, because, I even talked about it as a person who went to grad school and I took out loans to do that. I honestly, in retrospect, maybe didn't need to do that. But anyway, it's water under the bridge. I have something personally to gain from doing it, right? So, but the issue is that this is an abusive language. This is not a true debt forgiveness. Right, so that's the first thing. It's just you're just transferring the obligation to a third party, and that's not something to celebrate. That's theft. So if the person I borrowed the money from, or even the university said, hey, we want to go ahead and give you that that master's degree for free, I'd be like, praise God for that. Let's celebrate that. But that's not what this is, and so it's deceitful.
It's really interesting that you point that out because in a way it kind of entices people toward, even against their best convictions, it kind of entices towards socialism. It kind of, you almost feel like, I don't really care who has to foot the bill for this. It's not me. And we don't even know, or maybe we kind of really don't want to care that is actually true, Todd.
Absolutely, yeah. This is actually, I'm glad you brought that up because to a broader point, a lot of the philosophies of people who advertise this or who are selling this point of so-called debt cancellation and other abuses of language, that's exactly what it is. It's a form of socialism. It's an idea that people should eat the bread that they didn't toil for or they didn't earn. Right, and we think that that's fundamentally an unbiblical principle where you shouldn't be benefiting from other people's labor unless, once again, they are giving you something of their own accord, an act of benevolence, a true act of benevolence. I'm all for charity, right? I'm all for that. But this is not what this is, and most people, and as I actually talked about in a Facebook Live that I did the other day, is that. Yeah. There are other people who are just as deserving, quote unquote, of some sort of debt relief, like people who took out a construction loan, for example. If you started a business and you're a blue collar worker, some of these cement trucks, I'm guessing they probably cost $200,000. That's not a small loan. So why would they give the student some reprieve without considering those people, right? So it just doesn't make any sense. And that's why I think there's an ulterior motive. This really isn't about debt cancellation at all. Even if it was a true debt cancellation, you have to ask the question, what's so special about going to college or more worthy of some sort of cancellation versus other forms of debt?
Yeah, I think you strike gold in asking that question, Todd. I really do, and I think you strike gold in arriving at a conclusion. I do believe that there are some people who maybe just like 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago now, they would have said that the conclusion that you arrive at is really kind of conspiratorial, that it doesn't really have a whole lot of evidence. But I think people have done more research, and there have been some things that have been revealed even without doing research. It's just watching, just reading your kids' curriculum, just looking in as they Zoom. I think people are learning that there is a sinister motive behind making college free. But before we get to the end, I want you to kind of like walk us through the trajectory as you perceive it. So why canceling student debt? Why canceling those loans and not say like medical loans or like you say small business loans? Like why not help the Black sister open her nail salon? Because that would be social justice, right? Like, why aren't we doing that, Todd?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? And so, it's just like anything, right? If it sounds too good to be true, it is, right? If someone comes to you, it's just like what you would teach your children. If there's some guy who, your kids say walking home from school, then I know, none of us here, we don't have our kids in public school, but this is let's just assume you did, right? Walking home from school, and you see some guy every day, and he's giving you candy, right? And it's like, all right, that's a little suspect. He doesn't know you. The question would be, why is he doing that? Right?
Yeah.
Because you always have to ask, a lot of times people, they do things with ulterior motives. So when I think about this student loan debt, I'm just like, well, if you give a construction guy some reprieve on his loan, that's good for him, but what does the government get out of it? Or what do the people who are pushing that, what do they get out of it? And the truth is that the schools are the most efficient way to push a certain ideology, right? Everybody has to go, for the most part. I mean, even people who elect out and go to private school or whatever, you're still getting vast swaths of the population going through the public school systems, be that at the university level or at the grade school level. So school in general is the pulpit, and they want to teach certain ideologies about socialism, about leftist politics, and that's really the reason why the schools are so important. And they start with the student loans because that's the low hanging fruit.
So how does that incentivize college attendance? Like, how does that, so if you cancel the debt, that's something that's past tense. They've already gone through school. Sure. What is the long game here from the liberal ideological perspective? What are they looking at down the line?
Well, yeah, it's just like many things that are often tried with respect to public policy. You can't get to it. Just think about what we've got with abortion, for example. When they first started to try to get abortion legalized or to try to make it a mainstay in society, they said they wanted it to be safe, rare, and legal, right?
That's right.
Initially, if they would have came out from the beginning and said we want abortion on demand for any reason at any time, they would have gotten nowhere, right? So this incrementalism, right? It's like you start with the student loan, right, and then the idea, it opens up the conversation for a more broader principle. Well, if we're forgiving people student loans, then we must ask the question: why are we denying access to education in the first place, right? And that's the way they'll frame it. We're denying access to education. It's like, no. Okay, yeah. Are you denying access to my food if you don't volunteer to pay for it? It's like, you're welcome to pay for your own food, right? But that's always the deceitful phrasing, right? So that's the first step. This is, in my view, this is just the first step. If they can get people to, in large part, buy into the idea that the burden to pay for school should be on the public and not on the individual, then this is the easiest way to shoehorn and get along that path of that viewpoint.
So then what ultimately happens, as you see it, Todd, is that you cancel the debt first. And so then you show that there is a great need to not even have this debt in the first place. Like, why do we have, all of these millions of dollars in debt? Like, why do we have this going on? So you cancel the debt. Then you get people in the mindset that, yeah, man, it's great to not have this debt. So ultimately what you're saying is college should be free.
Right. Exactly. And just to put some meat on that bone. Like, this is not just like some pie in the sky, like just like speculation. Just think about, go back and listen to Bernie Sanders and
yes,
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Elizabeth Warren. Yep.
Elizabeth Warren. Education is a fundamental human right. I'm just trying to think about Bernie Sanders.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Huh?
That's really good.
That's always how they that's always how they phrase it. Like, they've been saying this is not new, right? If it is in fact a human right, then they can just try to establish a case for why the public should pay for it, right? And it's, first of all, it's a non sequitur in the first place, because eating is a human right? Why should the burden of the public be able to feed everyone, right?
I have the answer for that, Todd. That's called nutritional justice. So there you go. That's the answer. That's why.
Right.
It's nutritional justice.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Pretty good. I'm going to use that, nutritional justice.
You're welcome. It's yours.
If you put justice on the end of anything, that justifies that. It makes it immediately pure and holy and righteous, right?
Man.
From the leftist orthodox perspective, that's the holy sacrament of justice. Right. So that's what they want to do. So this is, I just want to establish that point. I'm not making that up. They've been saying this for years.
You're absolutely right. So this would fall under the category of being a type of justice, a type of educational justice. But I want to go back to the point that you're making, because I think it's such an astute observation that the ultimate goal is that as many people as they can force to will be baptized through this school system. You will pass through some form of indoctrination so that you can be useful, by their definition, useful in society.
Let me ask this too. Do you think, for as the short game, is it about votes at all? That may seem like a small. Is it about votes because the administration is suffering?
Well, I do think it could be, in a sense, because I think the Biden administration right now is struggling for a win of any kind, right? But I think in a lot of ways this is kind of backfired, because they didn't go far enough for the hardcore leftists, right? Because it's injustice, because it's inequity, because the black people didn't get as much, so therefore this is structural racism. I mean, this is literally what people are saying. I mean, literally, that's I forget that. I'll try to find the clip for you guys later. But anyway, so in the short run, I do think it is a political ploy for votes, but I think the Biden administration may be taking one for the team, because I think this broader goal is in their targets, right? They want to convince the public that public school, not just through grade school, but through the university level. And then they want to, I think, and maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here, but then I think they want to be like, well, you can't really get any job that's worth anything without a college degree, because that's how they incentivize everyone to go to school. They've been doing this for years. Oh, you got to have a four-year degree for what? I can tell you that a four-year degree has helped me from a standpoint in some ways, because I work in financial services. That's pretty technical and sometimes pretty specific. But most jobs, I mean, you got a history degree and you go work in an office, filing papers. Like, why do you need a four-year degree to do that? I mean, honestly, it's absurd, right? And almost everything that's useful that you will learn for that job, you will learn on the job.
Man.
And maybe people are catching on. Do you think people are catching on that, man, I don't have to?
So fewer and fewer people
are going to go to college, and now they're saying we got to do something to keep these people in the pipeline, because, I recognize the same thing. There are a lot of jobs you can do and you can learn on the job, and you don't need to waste time and money.
Maybe through apprenticeship or something like that.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. And just as I just want to just give you my personal experience too, because even though I can say that my formal education has been beneficial to me, I don't want to downplay that.
Mm-hmm.
But what I realize is that I do data science right now for a financial services firm. But my first job as a data scientist, I only had a certification. So there are many alternatives. So basically, you might have heard of MOOCs, or massive open online courses. Mm-hmm. And I got a data science certification through an organization called Coursera. And so basically, I didn't have to go through all of the extra, your what do you call it, your electives and all this stuff, mm-hmm. and Englishes.
You didn't have to do like the gender studies and stuff?
No gender studies, right? I just needed to be able to understand the technicalities of statistics, a little bit of programming, and that got me started. And then when I got my first job, that was kind of where I learned really how to do data science mm-hmm. in the real world, right? And then I built on that. And so I actually got my actual data science, or basically a role as a data analyst, before I finished my graduate degree. Now, like I said, for me, it was very helpful because there was a 20-year gap between me finishing undergrad and going to grad school. And so some of the math and some of the technical stuff was really vital for me. I needed to revisit that. But most people mm-hmm. don't go into fields that technical, and it really isn't necessary. Mm-hmm. So the point that I'm making is there are a lot of alternatives, even for some of the technical fields, and in particular, if there's not a big gap between when you finished your last year of school and when you're starting that next year of training. If there's a big gap, maybe you need to go back and refresh. But if not, some of these certifications are plenty.
I think this should be so comforting for parents and even grandparents who would serve in helping to get kids to the next step in life. I think this should be very comforting because for so long, going to college was automatic, like getting your driver's license. It's just sort of like the next thing that you do. But I think increasingly what we see all across this country is that today's universities, I want to say the secular universities, but to be quite frank, you start doing the research, even some of the Christian universities, they become almost sort of like these tie-dye holding tanks where you just get to stay in there long enough to get your colors changed. And as soon as you get your colors changed, then they let you out into society and the larger population to do what they want you to do, or think, better said, think how they want you to think. We'll grab the break and we'll be right back.
Do you think it's okay for biological males to change in girls' dressing rooms, take college scholarships reserved for women, and use the legal system against females who disagree? The Department of Education does. They're proposing a new rule to force schools, colleges and universities, and females in general to accept an LGBTQ redefinition of gender. Let your voice be heard today and tell the Biden administration you oppose this new rule. Find all the details at afa.net.
AFR programming is now available on Alexa.
You're joking, right?
Nope, not joking.
Seriously?
Yep, this is not a drill.
Wait a minute. No way.
There's a way. The Alexa way. So if you just happen to miss your favorite shows, no worries. You can now listen to each podcast with Alexa. It's simple and it's free. Just visit afr.net/apps and click Alexa. We're not joking.
Hi, I'm Jan Harper. If you're a pastor's wife, come be encouraged and renewed as you share your challenges and stresses unique to pastors and their wives.
The AFA Pastors and Wives Fishbowl Retreat is returning October 18th through the 20th to Linden Valley Conference Center in Linden, Tennessee. The retreat is 3 days and 2 nights of relaxation and encouragement. Our host will be Pastor Bert Harper, Director of Marriage, Family, and Pastoral Ministries, and co-host of Exploring the Word on AFR, and his wife, Jan. And our special speakers will be Will and Miki Addison of Airing the Addisons on AFR. Lodging, meals, and materials are all included in your registration. But hurry, space is limited. Register today by calling 662-844-5036, extension 297. Or at repairingthefoundations.net.
The AFA Pastors and Wives Fishbowl Retreat. We'd love to see you there.
Hello?
Hey, stranger.
Oh, hi. Thank goodness it's you. I was afraid to answer the phone.
Why? What's up?
The credit card companies are after me. They want me to make payments and the calls never stop.
Ouch. Been there before, but I got help from Trinity Debt Management.
Trinity?
Yeah, I called and right away Trinity contacted my creditors and got my interest rates cut in half. They ended all the late fees and over-limit charges, and they stopped those annoying phone calls.
Bet that was a relief.
Yep. Then they put me on a plan that consolidated my bills into one easy monthly payment. That way, I paid off my debt fast while saving thousands.
Nice.
Trinity even showed me how to plan and meet a monthly budget. So now I'm debt-free for keeps.
Wow. Do you still have their number?
Sure. Here, write this down and call 1-800-788-1813.
Can you repeat that?
1-800-788-1813. That's 1-800-788-1813.
America, America, God shed His grace on thee. We've come too far, we've been through too much. Why would we ever leave?
I see teaching as a very political act. When we are engaging with our students, whether it's on social justice issues or multicultural issues or culturally relevant teaching, I see that as foundational to all learning.
Teaching a political act. And again, you could say, well, that's probably limited to that one teacher in that one school on the fringe of the country, except that you see it everywhere.
Right.
All across all of our schools, and multiple teachers who are not even quiet about it. I mean, and they have to be the most radical of the radical to even be called out, which means that they go viral. Maybe libs of TikTok, will pick them up and then they get called into the principal's office or something like that. And they've got to be the most extreme to actually lose their jobs. Otherwise, they continue quietly indoctrinating kids all across this country. Of course, we already know it's in the highest levels of academia, but it's also in K-12 schools. Right. Our guest today is Sir Todd Shannon. He is the host of the podcast, Who Cares What Todd Thinks? And he also blogs. His blog is called Todd Thinks, and you can read it at toddthinks.substack.com. They have anything shorter, Todd?
If I paid for it.
Oh, well, we don't want to do that because what do we? Maybe if you pay for it, they'll pay you back. I don't know. Maybe you can get that back. I don't know. Anyway,
I actually do have I think I did buy a URL, toddthinks.org or .blog. I don't know. It's something.
That's
I don't
okay,
use
Todd.
it,
I was just picking. Don't hurt yourself, Todd. I mean, it's just a lot to say. Todd thinks .substack. See, you see what I'm saying? Substack.
It is a lot to say. And by the way, I should change it to Sir Todd or something. I like that. I feel like it's united by the Queen of England.
I'm going to tell you.
You can call it Sir Todd.
I don't want to call it an anointment, but I feel like I can kind of do that for help a brother out. Help a brother out. Hey, no, but we're talking about student loan forgiveness, and this is a current conversation happening in our country, and I think that you have certainly an insightful take on this and a caution that I think all of us should heed. What's the ulterior motive? Where ultimately is this going? One of the things that we were talking about before we went to the break, Todd, is that you already have in our school system, in our higher levels of academia, you already have radical indoctrination. Unpack this for us. Some of the things that you've discovered in your research that you talk about on your podcast, that you talk about when you do posts, that you're writing about. What really is the threat? And I don't mean to be sensational, but I don't think I'm overstating it to ask it in these terms. What really is the threat to the Republic when our kids are basically indoctrinated from the time that they can eat Cheerios with their own fingers until death?
Sure, yeah. I think, there's a number of media channels that I consume, and they like to call this overarching theme, they call it the message, right? The message. And the message is diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's the overall framework, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you dig a level down, deeper, they parse that out as racial. That's the lead freight car, right? Racial equity and inclusion, sexual equity and inclusion, right? And then, obviously economic and all of the things that go with that. So they are actively trying to subvert the parental role as the primary teacher of ethics to the children. This is the primary threat, because this is an alternate system of ethics, right? And they wrap it up in this diversity, equity, and inclusion umbrella, but it's a moral system. It's a false moral system. It's a false system of justice that, if you are a Christ follower in particular, and just, in my view, a reasonable person in general, you will see that these ethics are fraudulent. They're fraught with all types of self-contradictions, and but it is that primary ethos that they want to impart through the educational system. And if it takes hold, then there's no reasonable expectation that the traditional ideas that we have held in this country, particularly by those who are Christ followers and of that tradition, there's no reason to think that those ideas would be the primary ethical system that we'll have in this country moving forward. It will supplant, because they are inherently at odds.
Yeah, I call their philosophies, their ideologies. I actually see a little bit of cannibalism in them, that they eat one another. Ultimately, if you just leave them alone, they take little nips out of each other. And if you watch them, they're constantly fighting for who's at the bottom and who is more deserving of the moment that they're in, whatever that moment happens to be. But it's something interesting that you're talking about. And I want to kind of go back to this when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So often, K-12 schools, there are cuts that they routinely make. They say they don't have the funding for this, or this is not in the budget. Certainly within academia, maybe they've got to lay off this person here. You've got a lot of teaching assistants who are teaching classes, and all of these things that are kind of not allowing, for the degrees to be what they once were. I'm not trying to be offensive. I'm just saying those are the realities. But interestingly enough to me, always in the budget, we can have a DEI officer. And not one that is being paid, pence. Like, you've got a DEI officer who could be, fresh out of college or fresh off of huge social media following. Okay. And so people are listening to what this person is saying and making tens of thousands of dollars a year, just kind of going into that position. Help me understand that, Todd.
First, I want to offer a correction to the DEI officer. It's a DIE officer.
DIE officer.
DIE, diversity, inclusion, equity. Because if you put it that way, it's DIE. That's what happens to your organization. That's what happens.
Duly noted. Let me rewrite it.
If you implement their principles.
That's so
I
good.
sidetracked myself. Now I totally forgot your question.
No, I guess what I'm wondering is what it reveals about where we are, that there are some people whose jobs are not secure, but the DIE officer's job is always secure.
Sure, right. Because there again, I mean, if you think about what the DIE or DEI, whatever how you want to say it, if you think about what their role is, they function, and people do not understand this. They're like the priest of the new orthodoxy.
Wow.
They are there to enforce the ethical view and ideology of this new regime. They serve no role other than as a moral symbol. What do they do beside that? All they are doing, it's just like in a church, who do you have? You have elders, and we have basically a system of of authority in the church, where we have these people who are charged to make sure that people in the church are conforming to the ethics of the church, to the commandments of Jesus. And whenever there are people who run afoul of that, the church has a certain way of bringing those people back in line and escalating if they don't.
Right.
Right. This is the purpose of these people, and so it doesn't really matter what the business model or what the business is or what the institution is, whether it's education, whether it's business, because the DIE or the DEI officer is a universal role. There'll be one in government, and there'll be one at the corporation, and there'll be one at the school, and there'll be one in every institution. And that's their only role, is to enforce.
You said something in your most recent post that was a little bit chilling, but excuse me, is not surprising to think about. You foresee that there will be sort of mandatory college or mandatory secondary education or whatever, or, you know, I don't know if you would say that a doctorate would be included in that, but certainly 4-year degree. You believe that will one day be mandatory for employment in this country if the liberals have their way.
I do think so. I think if they can get to the place where, first of all, they will have had to have accomplished all of those prerequisites, which is to make secondary education completely free, right? I think that would be the logical precursor to that. But once again, how do you ensure that your entire workplace or your entire culture has been properly catechized, right? They have been properly quote educated or indoctrinated with that worldview, right? Because you can't have the homeschoolers invading, right? You can't have the people who have. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You certainly can't have people with these divergent worldviews infiltrating the organization, right? And so I think that, and I think it'll be softer. Like, because think about just to circle back to probably one of our favorite topics, the COVID vaccine, right?
Come on, man.
They didn't necessarily make it a crime not to get the vaccine. They just made it so that you couldn't really move and function in society as much as they could without it.
And you became socially inferior.
Get it, but
yeah.
Right. Like, you don't have to get it, but you just can't be here if you don't. So that's your choice.
Wow.
You know, it's like, okay, yeah. And so I don't, I wish I had knew what the solution to that was. I don't know. I know that certainly there has to be obviously a subculture or a counterculture to that movement, and but it is on the table, I think, as a possibility if we don't recognize it early and work to subvert it.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I'll throw out some of my thoughts here and then I'll get you guys' take on it, because when you start getting into the realm of talking about solutions and things like that, I think, and we had a guest on about a month or so ago, I think we need to bring back to the fore durable trades. And I think we need to start teaching our kids how to always have a job by having a service that you can do that always puts you in demand. Like working hard with your hands. For some reason, we entered this kind of phase in American history where we thought it was chic to sort of denigrate those who worked with their hands, right? Those who could construct things. And now it turns out you've got contractors who are saying, well, see you in 3 months when I can get around to it. Or so I think there's a certain bring back, the gift of working with our hands as well. And maybe in some ways we begin to circumvent this potential funneling that would reach the employment level. I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I got to tell you, that's a very astute observation. And I have been subtly, and I think I did it more so because I just take a personal interest in these things. But, my wife is doing things like she's, learning how to, do a little gardening. right? How to grow some food here and there. We kind of start small.
Mm-hmm.
I've been slowly acquiring tools and learning basic carpentry. We finished our own basement. We repaired our own deck. I'm going to learn from a friend how to weld. I find these things to be interesting. I'm intrigued by them, but I also think that on another level, it might be necessary that you just know how to do stuff in case people try to push us out of mainstream society. And I'm not going to be that guy caught with his pants down. I know how to do stuff.
Yeah.
Listen, we could do it.
No, that's great. I mean, I totally agree.
We're with you on that.
With that, and I think we have to, even without, like you said, Mickey, with our children, begin to explore those type of things with them, because they can, if what they want to do calls for them to have a certain specified degree, that's fine. But they can also have tools in their belt to where they can always be in demand. I think that's right. I think more and more people are seeing that you don't actually have to go to these universities and colleges to make it. But man, I would say to give them those durable trades, would it would benefit our children and us.
Yeah. Amen. And I would just add quickly to that, the hard sciences, engineering, computer science, in this economy, those are invaluable.
There you go. There you go. Very good. Man, so great to talk with you, Sir Todd Shannon, host of the podcast, Who Cares What Todd Thinks? Increasingly more and more people will have to, because he's making sense. I really do appreciate it. I want to say one last thing as we wrap up the show. It used to be enough to just say that you had a college educated kid. Like that was sort of the ultimate success, that your kid is college educated. But man, what about a functional adult living and working for the glory of God? What if we made that even a higher aim than just saying I went to college? We're out of time. Until tomorrow, Lord willing.
God bless.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American